So Rashid, can we do the brand identity system but without doing the strategy before? Well, yes you can. What about, can we create high conversion copy without doing a strategy before? Well, yes you can. Okay, Rashid, can we create Facebook adverts without having a strategy in place prior to that? Yes, you can. This word gets kind of thrown around quite a bit, and maybe I'm also guilty of throwing it around as well. Everyone really wants to kind of claim that they do things better because perhaps they use a certain kind of strategic framework. Essentially, when we are applying this strategic thinking, we are figuring out a way in which to achieve a predefined objective. It's a plan, a high level plan on how we are going to achieve certain things. Okay. Let's look at strategy in the form of a journey, right? So we want to travel, or we want our end destination to be Melbourne, Australia. Well, we know our end goal. We also need to know where we are right now. We need to get from A to B. We know where B is. Now we need to figure out where A is. Where do we actually stand? Now we also need to know what that potential journey might look like. This is a kind of very, simplified way of looking at strategy. What happens if we were in a race from, let's say, Johannesburg to Melbourne? We would need to know where we are, Johannesburg. This is our starting point. We would need to know our objective, our end goal, Melbourne, Australia. We'd also need to know our competitors. How are they going to be traveling from Australia to, or from Johannesburg to Australia? Will they be traveling by plane? Definitely not by car, all right? So we've got plane, maybe they're going by ship, high speed kind of boat, but probably more likely a ship, right? So we got to figure out who we are in terms of what our capabilities are and how we are going to get to our destination before our opponents. If we just kind of set out and get on your paddle boat and go on there without doing any research, you might land in Australia 2 or 3 months later, only to find out that you're 7.5 weeks late because all your other competitors jumped on a plane and flew across and got to their destination in under 24 hours. So you pretty much lost before you started. I would say that is more for a business view of, if you want to call it, strategy. But we can apply the same kind of strategic thinking to the brand. And the frameworks that we use are designed to draw out the essential or the core parts of a brand or company and define them and articulate them very concisely in a way that creates a consensus within that group of owners or the C-suite or the group of entrepreneurs that have started up the company. And then we also go on to define who is it that we are really trying to attract. And I would say most companies, maybe a large percentage, as much as they might have segments of the market in which they are trying to target, many of them might not go into sufficient detail. A lot of it might just be demographics and a bit of need identification. There's also a level beyond that, and that level is got to do with the psychographic data of that ideal user. And these psychographical points refer to the needs, but also the desires and the beliefs of that user. It's got to do with their fears, the way in which they see themselves and their worldview. And taking these kind of points into account will allow the business to structure their communication in such a way that speaks directly to that user in a way that will deeply connect with the user and make that user feel like they are being understood. This is, I would say, one of the main reasons that companies end up spending way too much money on the paid advertising, the placement. And the focus is more on that placement as opposed to the positioning. And it's pretty common, I would say, for business owners to feel like the conceptual process or that thinking process is almost less important. And they might be true to a certain degree. There is that process of refining your messaging that gets put out there. But if a business decides not to spend sufficient amount of time and effort and resources into that strategic phase, then it's very possible that you might go out there with your digital marketing strategies and or advert placements and creative, and you might find yourself scratching your head as to why the conversions aren't at the level that you might have expected it to be. So yes, it is possible to jump in, build a website, create logos and a brand identity system, write copy onto that website, and then advertise your business on the different kinds of channels available. But without that dissection of what's happening specifically within your marketplace, and without creating that differentiation that will essentially separate you from your competitors, you might find yourself in a pickle, possibly an expensive exercise. the kind of main takeaways that I would advise anyone before going into any kind of marketing or branding activity for their business would be to figure out the right questions that they need to ask, and then gather sufficient evidence or data to answer those questions. I would also advise them to get an outside party to act as a mirror, to question their unconscious beliefs and cognitive biases that they may have towards certain parts of their business. This is key. Falling in love with your idea or your business or your product in many ways could be to the detriment of your company. Hey, as a fellow business person, I understand the hardships and the challenges that we had to go through to get our businesses to the level that it's currently at. And in many ways, it's actually our child, it's our baby. And when someone else comes into the picture and tells us our baby isn't really that cute, immediately we shut that person off. We don't really take into account what they have to say. And this is the job of a brand strategist. As much as they work on the positioning of the brand, creating that unique, memorable identity and conveying that message to the ideal user, they actually work very closely with the business owner to question their beliefs. And this is probably the most critical part of being a brand strategist, is the ability to be that mirror and question the assumptions. So, can you do any kind of digital marketing activities or branding activities without a strategy in place? Yes, you can, but it's probably going to be an expensive exercise. If you liked today's video, please consider subscribing, and if you have any questions or comments, do leave a comment in the comment section down below. And till next time.